Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Cigna Healthcare International Markets LinkedIn Live. Today, we're going to be examining the lessons we can learn from across borders when we think about holistic employee well-being. My name's Jason Sadler, and I'm head of international markets for Cigna Healthcare. And I'm joined by two very special guests today, Sevda Esenturk, who's head of HR for international healthcare at Cigna, and Scott Armstrong, who's CEO and founder of Mental, a platform aimed at tackling the stigma behind mental health. But I'm sure I don't give full credit to their backgrounds and experience. So I'm going to ask them just to share a little bit more about themselves. And Sevda, over to you.
This is Sevda, head of HR for Cigna Healthcare International Health. I'm partnering with Jason with the full accountability on people strategies. Over the years, I worked across borders and different industries. This is really close to my heart, well-being, holistic well-being especially. This is where actually we can make a big difference on this journey together.
Me, Scott Armstrong, founder of Mental. Very personal mission to tackle the stigma of mental health. My father was a very successful CEO, strong individual, but struggled with depression, and that robbed us of him. He could not open up and talk about it, despite us being a close family. So at that point, I recognized that we needed to be able to have more open and honest conversations. I think in the last 3 years since we founded Mental, I've probably spent 3,500 hours looking at the concept of workplace well-being and what it means.
Thanks to both of you. We have got a number of questions that I'm going to ask you all to respond to, but this is supposed to be an interactive session. So all of you that are watching, please do feel free to use the chat function to send any thoughts, comments, or questions, and we'll do our best to address them. But let's kick things off and get straight into it. And first of all, Scott, particularly when we're thinking about holistic well-being, what does it really mean to you, and why do you think it's so important in today's global workplace?
I think it's a recognition, which sounds counterintuitive, of the fact that there is actually an I in team. And actually every team is made up of tens, hundreds or thousands of I's who are human beings rather than automatons who are engines or units of economic output. And is recognizing that those human beings, when they walk through the door, doesn't stop them being human beings. So how do you then create a culture that those human beings, with all the different things that make up their well-being, whether it be social, financial, workplace, spiritual, physical, many of the pillars that we actually see in the Cigna International Healthcare Study as well. How do we create an environment where there's human beings can flourish? Why is it important? Because, here in the UAE, we've done the maths, and disengaged employees can cost up to $42 billion in lost productivity, whereas investing in well-being can actually bring in $60 billion just here in the UAE. So it's a fundamental business question.
Thank you. And some quite impressive statistics there, which I think gives everybody some food for thought. And Sevda, that really ties into something that you and I have spoken a lot about over the years, which is the link between employee well-being, engagement, and then what it means in terms of their overall sort of productivity. Because at the end of the day, any manager or leader always wants to get the best possible out of their employees. So do you want to talk a bit more about that and your experience?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. First of all, when people are looked after, they give their best actually to the organization and to themselves as well. Think about yourself, when you are rested, when you are in good mood, when the company actually really value your the way how you work, you feel different. Your energy is different, obviously a positive way. So this is where actually you can be more productive, more constructive actually, and then perform super well and at the same time engage. For me, well-being goes beyond yoga classes or food in the office, to be honest. We have to really take care of our employees. They have to feel valued, feel secured actually at the workplace. Sometimes that means flexible working. They want to pick up their kids. By all means, please do. And sometimes, small gestures, small moments like how are you today also makes a big difference. I think small moments, it's making a big difference and build a big trust between employees and their managers as well. And the result shows us obviously the more engaged employees and more productive employees at the end. So this is where I experienced over the last more than 20 years in different industries and companies. And well-being is for me a culture rather than an initiative or any program.
Thank you. And I guess you both really touch on a very important point, which is whilst for years we talk about the importance of teams, the reality is the workplace is still made up of lots of individuals. And I think our ability to understand what's important to one individual, which may be different from another individual, is really important. So Scott, I know you're really well versed in Cigna Healthcare's global mobility report.
I do.
And an interesting thing that came out from a recent report was that expats tend to report a higher vitality than often the local-based employees. Why do you think that is?
There's a number of factors in that. I mean, if you here in the UAE, the last Cigna study showed us that actually the well-being, overall well-being here is far higher than some of the global average. And we know some of the things here. We know it's safe. There's so much to do. There's lots of opportunity. So there's lots of pluses. Also, we do tend to be that one step removed from the negative news that might be happening in the local communities back where we're from. So we're in this, we've made this adventurous choice to move to a different part of the world. For a lot of us, it's still an adventure. And then when we get into being parents, we're very, very grateful that actually we live in an incredibly safe space where our children can grow up with less of the concerns and pressures that any of us might face in the different homelands that we've come to before we made UAE our home.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to some friends at the weekend, and they'd been back to the US during the summer vacation, and the mum was just comparing, how different the kids that have, lived and being brought up, particularly in the UAE for many years, versus their counterparts back in the US. And what's normal for one is not very different, and again, therefore, parents' expectations. So. And really, I mean, that then comes into culture. And obviously being a truly global organization, culture is something I know, Sev, that's very, very close to your heart. And I think particularly in many markets, there is a stigma when it comes to talking about mental health. I mean, I worked out in Hong Kong for many years, and it's only up until recently that you've even heard the term sort of mental health come up in sort of conversations. So how do you think companies can really go about sort of overcoming those cultural barriers and yet still ensure, an appropriate sort of both engagement and employee well-being program?
I would say broadly yes, but the expressions I think across cultures would be different based on my experience. And then I can give you a couple of examples. For instance, as most of the part of Asia, for instance, they may react differently, obviously, more conservative, more, we can tackle this point more confidential kind of a services and more like a check-ins, private check-ins, right? In Middle East Africa, for instance, it's more about, sharing with the families, peer groups, and how when it comes to the Europe is more about it's embedded in the culture already, and then it requires more like time off and recovery. Vitality is super, over there, it's common practice, let me put it that way. The stigma part is real. Not everyone will raise their hand and say, I need help. I think we need, as a company, we have to actually provide choices to the people. For me, it's more important starting with the, how we can led by example. Our leaders can tell the stories about that, give their own examples, actually real stories. I think it will make a big difference. The second is companies can provide digital applications like we do have in Sydney as well, right? And the employee assistance programs that most of the multinational actually is providing nowadays. And also make it as a culture rather than initiative or program. I think that will make a big difference so people can choose, from this part. But managers they're gonna play a big role here. That's my takeaway actually from.
So how can an organization actually help managers, particularly when you're, moving manager from one country to another, to understand those cultural nuances and to, be aware and look out for perhaps some of those signals which may be different from one culture to another?
I would normally, advise the managers to have a kind of a buddy from this, that location, so that really help the employees actually to know the different cultures as well. These buddy programs are, most of the even local and multinational companies they are providing, and also having a diverse team all around the world, right? We have in Cigna, so this is also helping a lot to make a big difference, in their daily life. So my probably biggest advice would be, buddy the manager and then teach. And also there are lots of trainings about the obviously cultural differences in the respective countries we are sending our managers. So that's also helpful to make it happen. Anyway, it's very common practice for multinationals and expats. They have cultural trainings
Yep.
to make them.
Again, going back to our report, again, one of the other interesting things that came out of the recent survey was it said that I think about 50% of expats actually feel a lack of companionship in their host country.
Yeah.
So what do you think organizations should do to design programs that really include everyone, and so that people do not feel that they're alone or being left out?
Well, I mean, supporting community and creating a sense of community, both at a kind of macro level, everyone being connected to the mission of the company helps, but also just engendering that sense of community within teams and within departments is very, very important. I mean, loneliness, and even the US Surgeon General, the science now shows us that loneliness is actually physically bad for your health. It is the equivalent of smoking 14 cigarettes a day. And it's one of the key symptoms as well. That kind of isolation and people being withdrawn is one of the key symptoms that can lead to burnout as well. So it's really, really important to have dialogue. And I think what's very important in companies is to create the space and the time to have this conversation at an organizational level, but then on a kind of one-to-one level. And that's every level. I mean, we talk about strategy being conceived at the top, but delivered at the bottom. Company culture is as reflected as much by your security guard as it is the CEO. So it is about how do you create that psychologically safe space where everyone can walk through the door and feel that they can be open and honest about how they're feeling. Because there are certain universal truths around how we are feeling in our mental health. Loneliness, that is real key one. So encouraging community in different aspects, because not everyone's going to join the football team, but creating a safe space where everyone could come is a really good starting space.
Yeah, I mean, loneliness, particularly during the pandemic, when everybody went to remote working, particularly for what I'd call sort of early career, younger people,
definitely.
many who were living on their own. I mean, that really wasn't a key problem.
I think the difference in perspective as well, because obviously I don't know what your perspective was during lockdown, but I was a father of a young child. So I've got my wife, I've got my kid, I'm in a villa, I've got a garden. So for me, lockdown was actually, because this is pre-mental, was actually brilliant. It was kind of almost like being on holiday to away. But if you're a kid who's trapped in a one bedroom or a studio apartment with no balcony that couldn't go anywhere, has suddenly been cut off from their family, which is often their friends at work, it leaves them very, very isolated. And also they've been cut off as well, particularly if they're new in their roles, from that almost like mentorship by osmosis. They're not sat around people soaking up. Sometimes you learn just by listening to how other people talk on the phone. And that suddenly was removed as well. So I think COVID really did show us and kind of open up the conversation about mental health and well-being in workplaces. I think what's really, really important is to resist the urge to try and snap back to the way it was, because I don't think it was perfect pre-COVID.
I mean, that really ties into, something, again, we've spoke a lot about over the last 18 months, Sevda. I mean, hybrid working, the reality is, it is the new norm, and different companies are approaching it in different ways. But how does an organization, a global organization like Cigna, still ensure that it takes care of employees' well-being in this new hybrid and ever-changing and evolving sort of work environment? How do we still make sure that we meet the needs of our employees?
Yeah. In Cigna Healthcare, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a culture for us. This is not a buzzword. This is a way of working. So we do have many actually initiatives. I can talk about. One of them is, for instance, Wellbeing Challenge. As you were the part of the this program, it's mindfulness, stress management, covering fitness, nutrition. So it's kind of a way of covering the whole well-being concept. So, and also a lot of community events, we were part of it, like partnered with UNICEF, Water Walk. So that's also create the awareness of mental health. It's the global actually awareness of mental health, but we were part of it. So I'm really proud of it. So these programs are designed actually only not to promote the mental awareness, but also as a company, we are part of it. And as a company, we want to assure that, this is our culture, embedded in our culture, in our daily workday. So these are the programs I can talk about. And the most obviously proud of employee assistance program that, we can easily call. 24 hours available. Our employees can call and ask help. So this is the three things I can talk about it as a Cigna Healthcare, and I'm sure other companies also they have similar initiatives, and we should be very proud of providing this to our employees so they can feel safe, valued in the workplace.
I think that word culture as well is incredibly important, because you can be an organization, you can invest in an EAP, and I've worked with different EAP providers, and they'll tell you the difference between a good EAP and a bad EAP is engagement.
Yeah.
So is it 6% who are engaging with the product, or is it 60%? And if your teams don't feel that they can engage with it because they fear it will be weaponized, and it comes back to that fruit doesn't negate fear.
Yeah.
Culture, trust, and that kind of conversation, if you can build that, then everything else kind of comes after, and that's a value add on top of trust and culture.
And it's encouraging that safe environment, that trust, because then when people have taken advantage of an EAP and had a good experience that's helped them, they will tell others, and that will encourage others to try using it.
But I still believe that, small actions by leadership also, it will make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Obviously, here in the Middle East, a lot of small businesses, SMEs, entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yeah.
How do they go about prioritizing and looking after employee well-being when they don't necessarily have the all the resources at hand of a?
Can I come back for 10 out? It's actually really, really challenging. And I think one of the big things that we like to challenge is this whole, you've heard of hustle culture. And actually, if you're an SME, the common figures will tell you that 90%, 9 out of every 10 new business will go out of business. And quite often it will be that burnout where people kind of give up just before things happen. And our question is, rather than hustling and working yourself to the absolute bone, your product may be one of your non-negotiables. The time you give in your service might be a non-negotiable, but particularly as you are the foundation of your business plan, how are you looking after both your physical health and your mental health? Because they are in fact one thing. How are you looking after your holistic health? That should be the foundation, because that will give you the energy to keep going. So yeah, I think it's vital. I think we need to get past this idea that we should hustle until we fall over.
Yeah. And I guess linked to that, and again, something that we've seen in our global survey, something again, I think we talk about a lot. I think actually one of our management capabilities we like to see is resilience. And we know that if there isn't that resilience, then that is where mental health can start to become an issue. But perhaps, Sefta, from your perspective, how do we help, managers, leaders, employees be resilient? And again, what are the support mechanisms we can put in place to help with that?
For me, I think it's the most important, as many times I mentioned in this live event, the led by management, definitely the managers should be, start the conversations around that and give the, I think, strong, let's say, support to the employees to make it happen. Again, show the real stories, tell the real stories about that. That's also super important for me. The most important thing is, as long as we provide the safe environment for everyone, no matter what managers, employees, I think they will feel the right support from us. That's what I would probably.
And add one little statistic, actually, there's that middle management section is actually really, really important inside an organization for two reasons. One, you can ask people to bring their whole self to work, but actually your line manager has almost 70% control over your well-being in the office environment. But at the same time, we see that middle managers suffer more negative mental health outcomes than the kind of overall population of the workforce, because they report up and they have people, they have responsibilities down. So that's when it's really important. And I worked on the Cigna's 5% pledge, which was all about leaders at every strata throughout the company devoting 5% of their time to talk and think about well-being. So leaders need to model it, to then give permission to the middle managers to model it, to then give permission, and you cascade. It trickle down economics in a way in terms of well-being inside an organization, but it's super important that it's at every single level in the company.
Yeah, just to share a bit for the audience about Cigna's sort of 5% pledge, which we actually launched a couple of years ago now. But we actually asked managers across the organization to actually sign up and commit to spending 5% of their time actually taking the time to have interest, in their teams, in their colleagues, trying to understand if there were issues or concerns that they could perhaps help them with, or if they couldn't help them personally, then at least show them where they could go, whether it be using EAP. And again, I think that went down with resounding success. And again, I think the results of that came back through our employee survey. It showed that as managers, as an organization, we really do care for our employees.
And they should speak up, obviously. The communication is the first way of, for me, the first step of well-being. And also asking support is a strength, not a weakness for me. So, yeah.
I think what I liked about it, which I think is really, really important for organizations, was it was a way of building time and space into the Outlook calendar of leaders to talk about well-being, mental health of people. If you think 5%, some people might say that doesn't seem like a lot, but actually it equated to just a little over a 2-hour block in a CEO's diary every week. That's more than 50 hours. Actually, no, that's more than 100 hours a year of that CEO just thinking about the mental health and well-being of their people. Times that by 10 from a senior leadership team, you've got a lot of time to think about your people and a lot of time in which you can do some real good.
Scott, you've obviously worked with many sort of international organizations. I'm sure you've seen many different initiatives, many different programs. Are there any that particularly sort of stand out for you that you think have been, particularly good, best practice when it comes about sort of looking after employee well-being? And you don't have to quote Cigna, by the way.
I will, only because I feel the 5% pledge really did tackle a really important thing, which was, building that time and space in. Another local company that does it very well here is Emirates Global Aluminium. They did a really interesting thing as well. They moved well-being and mental health from HR and actually put it in health and safety. And the reason why they did that, and obviously they have quite a physically demanding job, many of their employees. So there was a real safety issue for them to make sure that their people are actually the best they can be to look after their genuine physical welfare. But they put in a number of different things. They took actually away a lot of KPIs and they said to the health and safety, go and try this. You can go and try and fail. You can go and try something. If it works, brilliant. We're going to give you a 3-year window just to look at this. And we're not going to tell you that you have to justify every penny you spend. At the end of that first year, when they started building community and started embracing wellbeing, EGA, in a very challenging economic market, had their best financial year ever. So the leadership there are really, really bought in. It is good business to be a good business. And this is the thing, I would love leaders of every variety to believe it here in their heart, but actually it's really good for the P&L and the bottom line.
Yeah, Sebda, you've obviously worked for a number of, international organizations over the years. Anything else stand out for you?
For me, as I told you, when we embed it in our people culture strategies, I think it's coming naturally the best outcome. For me, it's more or less being responsible. This is everybody's responsibility, not just HR, not just leaders, but everybody's responsibility on taking care of well-being our employees, how they feel safe, how they feel valued. So I'm not going to repeat what I said, but it's more, as I mentioned at the beginning, small, consistent actions by leaders. It's really important for me. It has to start from the top to the bottom. So we have to take care of our employees. Yeah.
And one further little example. We run the mental awards every year. Cigna kindly sponsors them. One of the winners last year from the education sector was Aspen Heights British School. They built in for their students peer-to-peer support. And I think that's something in organizations, peer-to-peer mental health and wellbeing champions, so that people can actually know there's somebody there I can talk to. I think that can be quite effective inside organizations.
Sebda, one for you that's come in from the audience, and we've got about 3 minutes left. So, but they said, what are the real benefits of an employee?
The real benefits of the AIC program is taking care of our employees individually. No judgment whatsoever. Basically, it's a real in-time support that I think if they don't have the, let's say, luxury to have this opportunity, if they don't have the insurance to call the psychologist, if they don't have the actually support externally, this is the immediate support from our company will be provided immediately. So this is amazing program. I'm very proud. I've seen many good results. They were really like in the mental health, and then they had a break like a month and come back in a good shape and thanking us, and they were proud working in here. So this is amazing program, and I hope all the companies they should have this kind of assistance program.
Well, on that note, we are coming up on time today. I mean, firstly, thanks for both of you. Some really great insights, those. Hopefully everybody on the audience found it insightful as well. It is a very important subject, and I think one that's only going to get even more important.
Absolutely.
As the environment we work in continues to be even more dynamic.
Absolutely.
And even more challenging. For those of you that haven't, please do take the opportunity to review the Cigna Healthcare Global Mobility Report. Again, there's some really interesting learnings from there. So again, I think that's it for us today. Thank you everybody for dialing in. Thanks again, Sevda and Scott. Thank you all for joining, and I really hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.